Hello, and thanks for joining us today. This Making Flexible Working Work webinar is proudly brought to you by the Flex Agility Group. My name is Vanessa Vanderhoek, founder of Flexible Working Day, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you today to Tim Morrison, who's a passionate and professional umpire, as well as a HR professional. Tim is a Flexible Working Day ambassador, and he is here to tell us and share with us his amazing life lessons on how he's made flexibility work for both his personal and professional life. Hello, Tim. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Vanessa. Happy Monday. Thanks for having me.
We've got some mugshots of yours. So before we kick off, do you want to just give us a bit of a background of, who you are in your personal life and your professional life?
Sure. So as maybe some of the logos on the screen there can indicate, I'm employed in a professional role, and I say the quote 9 to 5 role for Mercer, and then also as a side hobby or a side gig, as you would call it, I'm a professional boundary umpire with the Australian Football League, officiating in matches at the AFL level all across the country for 9 months of the year when the season's on.
Wow, it's busy. And I love your story because when we spoke, I think it was late last year, you were sharing that you're so passionate about flexible working within, I suppose, Mercer and your professional role, but also within your sporting, and it's something that's followed you, I suppose, a lot of your career. And it's not for childcaring responsibilities, which we often hear, and it's also not part-time, and it's also not working from home. And I love your story about how you make it work, how you're bringing those, I know you said the 9 to 5 role that you have, but that, can I use your word, that fluidity of bringing it all together and getting that harmony. I love your story. So tell us a little bit more. How do you make it work?
That's it. No, thank you. It is, I think what I've learned when I've sort of maybe sharing my story in the past is that this is a unique situation where it isn't to do with what had traditionally been used for or reasonings for flexible working. So it really has been a part of me. Now, I've been at the AFL level for since 2010. So it's been a long time that this has been a part of me, and I've effectively, I might delve into what an actual boundary umpire is for any listeners who may not be avid AFL football followers. AFL umpiring, AFL, the game itself, is obviously a very fast-moving game, and boundary umpires are the sideline referees, for want of a better word, which is which requires a high amount of physical aerobic capacity to be able to do it. So it's not like a normal weekend warrior kind of stuff where you just rock up and perform it. You need to actually maintain your fitness all throughout the year. And as well as being at AFL level, it would probably be called a semi-professional commitment to it in terms of the hours. So I'd probably roughly average around about 25 to 30 hours of commitment to doing the role each week. And as much as I talk like that, I actually really am passionate about doing it. Like, I've made a lot of friends through it, got to experience a lot of great examples in the game itself, and also being AFL as a national league, I've been able to travel around and see parts of Australia which I probably never would have if I wasn't there with the AFL. So what that has meant for me is really maintaining that balance with my professional career here at Mercer, and also my sort of passion career with the AFL. And and I keep talking about maybe the word of balance, but I think what really works for me is integration. And I think it's not about trying to maintain a balance, it's trying to maintain that integration where they exist side by side with one another, where one's not affecting the other. Or I think on the previous slide there was the scales. So how I do it with with both employees is if one, I try to make sure that one's not being outweighed to the other, because AFL umpiring as in itself isn't going to be a lifelong career for me. I mean, physically, I couldn't keep going until I was in my 50s, as an example. So I sort of need to make sure that I'm keeping my other professional career going and progressing at the same time. So what comes out of that is hopefully I've been able to progress, and I have been able to progress in both careers so far. I've been at Mercer for nearly 9.5 years now. So mostly everyone here at Mercer knows me as a HR business partner at the moment, but also, you know, being in Melbourne as an AFL umpire draws you into a lot of conversations with people as well. And I think talking about how that works from a flexible working arrangement has sort of painted the picture around what constitutes why a flexible working and the reasoning behind it, where it's in the past it might have been something different. So I certainly wear that hat here internally at Mercer of promoting flexible working in all shapes and forms, because I really live it. I have to live it week to week because this is the situation I find myself in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, what does it look like for you? So what does flexible work mean to yourself in, I suppose, making it happen, having this harmony?
So like what I touched on before with the role of a boundary umpire at the AFL level, with there's a lot of focus on training to maintain that physical aerobic fitness every week. So what it really does come down for me is real strategic time management, and being able to slot things in where you can have time. So obviously working full time and doing this at the same time, you do build up a good methodology on how to slot things in. So you can almost book things. You really got to sort of time your calendar week in, week out.
Yeah. So you do that. Really ritualize your planning. So you ritualize planning at work, planning at home.
Effectively, yeah. And you're trying to, again, talking about that integration is to make sure that then outside of those two careers, that my personal life is also not affected as well. You know, I have friends and family I would like to go and see as much as possible, and loved ones, and ensuring that, you know, all facets of my life there's enough time dedicated to it. So over the last 8 or so years, I've sort of almost got to a really good way of how to perfect that time management. Now, obviously, there'll be things that'll change from either side. So with the AFL, it's on a weekly basis when we sort of find out which game we're doing. It's not a set fixture for the whole season of, you know, you're doing this game and through there. Right. So that in itself draws that fluidity about, well, it's going to be different week in, week out. So, you know, if I look at the season from last year gone, I would think I was traveling interstate on a Friday or a Monday, probably 9 or 10 times out of the season. So I had to, and that was only finding that on a weekly basis. So it would mean I'd have to look in advance to see what deadlines I had here in my role at Mercer, what meetings I may have had. If they were going to be face-to-face, could I change them to a Zoom meeting, and when I could slot things in. So it really does make you plan very, very well, albeit at the same time it can, you know, things will change and deadlines will drop and et cetera from there. So it really has built up that sense of time management. And I think further to that, it makes you appreciate, certainly in my, you know, like I said, I've been here at Mercer for a long period of time. I've certainly appreciated the benefit that comes with flexible working, and you always have that wanting to repay the faith back to those who are investing in their time into you as well. So it's a very good, that integration is what I've found is, when I actually did take some time to actually reflect on it, it was integration that really, what I depend on is that integration, because if one is outbalanced than the other, performance could be affected from there. And I certainly want to strive, and I'm wholly invested in both careers at this current point in time. So I don't want to, throw either one out of the way, because I really love umpiring football. It really is a passion of mine. I've been doing it since I was 16. Started doing it for pocket money, and now just loves the feeling of doing it week in, week out. So in both roles, both a HR business partner role and definitely AFL they share a real common element of a pursuit of excellence. So it's always wanting to maintain that standard and keep pushing from there.
I love it. And look, more and more of us are facing that, you call it a dual career, don't you? That you have these two careers. Yeah. We hear the term portfolio career, and I often get asked, what does that mean? And that's exactly what you're doing, where you have different types of passions and work in different particular roles, whether or not it's board roles or volunteering roles, or you've got a couple of different organisations that you do work for. One of the things that I often hear is it all sounds great. It all sounds like, a wonderful thing to do and very exciting, but it is the boundary management. Like, to use your sporting language around boundaries, it is a challenge, because people are saying, well, they've got their emails on their iPads, they've got their emails on their phones, they're constantly feeling like they have to be on top of everything, because they're either starting early, starting late, working reduced hours because they're working part-time, or whatever arrangement that they may be working in. What's your, I suppose, top tip based on your, almost a decade of experience, if we're honest, around really being clear about what your boundaries are? Because let's be frank, when you're on the field, you're not thinking about work.
No, definitely not.
Off. There must be some way that you flick a switch.
No.
What's your tips for us?
Well, I would maybe even preface that by saying the beauty of the physical element of umpiring, and probably any kind of sport you're doing, is that in itself allows you to switch off from the time pressures of work and even from life in general, because your mind is, well, no, I'm very much concentrating on what I need to be doing, because it is a high pressure game. But I think exercise and sport in itself is a very good leveler in terms of switching off from anything that's going on in your life. So I've sort of been been able to grab that benefit from that. But I think more, so maybe to go on, your point is the number one tip is communication. I mean, communication is incredibly vital to let people know what's going on in your life and how they can assist you, or just to let people know what's aware. I mean, a key reason I joined Mercer in the very beginning, all these years ago, was that I could see that it supported the health and well-being of its employees through the provision of, as funny as it would sound, just a shower and change room facilities in their actual office here in Melbourne. My previous employer before that didn't have that.
It's amazing, isn't it? So
yeah, and I'd raised the issue in my interview with Mercer about saying, I really need some flexibility because I've got this going on. But a key attraction that I have for Mercer, as well as the role itself that I was applying for, was they had these benefits of they supported the health and well-being of other employees. So I sort of made that upfront in the interview to say, you're going to be benefiting me by allowing me to use the facilities and go for a run at lunchtime or before work, etc. But then I wanted to ensure them that I would repay that faith back, because I'm getting that work-life balance and that integration from the word go. Yeah. So it's all about it. For me, it's always been about communication. I've always led that dialogue with my managers, and now I've had 4 different roles here at Mercer over 8 years. And I still remember when I moved into the HR team, so I was in a client-facing role before that. And I remember, I was quite hesitant to talk about the arrangement at the time at the start. But then I just thought, no, just keep being transparent in the interview process. and the hiring manager at the time. And I found that they were very compatible with flexible working, because we had established communication channels around the expectations of the role, and then I came in with what my expectations were, and we've essentially been working like that hand in hand ever since. So it really has, and again, the beauty of time has really helped out in terms of developing that relationship with the managers I've had at the time. Not to mention, it's quite a unique situation. So it's not like they've heard this before and they know the expectations of it, where it's like it is incumbent on me to communicate what the needs and requirements I'm needing, because it's not a cookie cutter approach that work with others, and particularly that fluidity of it on week in, week out around it. And with HR work, HR business partner work, there is a lot of project-based work. So really it can be quite intense times, and you're working quite long hours, and you've got this other thing to deal with, to work and concentrate on as well. So it's all about, I found it's always been about communication, always up front, always talking about it. And I've sort of worn that like as a badge of honor, really, is about, this is who I am. This is what you're going to take me for. This is how I'm going to be. But if we can find a good arrangement that works out for both teams, I'll be extremely dependable, and I'll repay the faith back as much as possible. And I think through that, I've ultimately become, because I've been more balanced in my life, I've ultimately become a more effective employee, because I've got that integration, that balance working very, very well. And that might, without not tooting my own horn, but that might be reflective of the 4 different roles I've had here at Mercer, because I've been able to progress my career at the same time as having a really unique, flexible working arrangement through there.
Yeah. So, I think what you said was just so true of so many of us, that you get to that point that you feel like you can't ask for it, or you can't have that discussion. And I reflect on one of my executive roles. I was here in Canberra and the role moved to Sydney, and it's so funny when you go back in time, isn't it? And I had all these ideas about how I'd move to Sydney and commute, actually rent a unit up there permanently and have my family here and all these crazy things. And but you do it because you think that's the normal and that's what society is saying. And I just opened up the discussion, actually, like you. I plucked up enough courage to say, you know what? Is there another way that this role could be delivered? And so we ended up doing like a FIFO, a fly in, fly out, which is often done in mining type roles.
Yeah.
But who's to say it can't be done for our types of roles if you really, if employers really do want that particular skill set and talent? And look, it worked. We delivered far faster on the program of work we had to deliver, because, to be frank, the type of working condition of having isolated time to think and do the deep work meant that we could write these policies and get this health reform agenda up far faster. So we did, 12 months worth of work in 3 months. And I think you're right, Tim, what you said about how you give back more. Sometimes if, it only takes a little bit for us as employees in those roles. I've got to ask you, guilt. It's one thing that I've struggled with. I hear it all the time that people feel guilty, for walking out of the office or for, asking for it. Have you moved past it, or does it stick around?
No, you're right. It is something that weighs on your mind for a little bit. And I especially found I think that guilt can almost come through as a side effect of what the workplace culture is at the time. And I'm not saying that that's just not as a general rule, but maybe that's where I was coming from. I might have been in a team in the past when I had this, where it may not have been a real positive workplace culture, and that guilt was there because I was doing my work, but there were others who were staying back and whatnot, and maybe lashing out because I was a little bit different in terms of my working arrangement, that they felt that was a negative impact. So there was a guilt around that in terms of I'm being singled out for it.
Yeah. We take it personally, don't we?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think it's a natural human emotion to take things personally. But, as a side thing, being an AFL umpire, you're getting a lot of abuse thrown your way anyway, which you're willing to just ignore, or it's just water off a duck's back.
Yes.
For colloquialism there. So that sort of guilt wasn't a huge a drainer on me, but I think how I sort of got out of that was I sort of had a real key focus on making sure I was dependable. So I did the things I needed to do, and I did them well. And made sure I didn't miss deadlines or didn't make excuses, and try and be, try to figure things out and be responsible. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have done that had I not had this arrangement, but being like this and being mindful of the integration that I needed, it just had a heightened sense of the need to meet the job expectations, because maybe it was a fear. Maybe instead of a guilt, it was a fear that those arrangements could go, because I'm not performing that role. It's like there was that imbalance through there. But I think I've been doing it for 8.5 or nearly 9 seasons now. I'm quite comfortable with the work that I'm producing and the work that I'm working on. So I never, when I leave, if I'm flying out to Hobart or something on a Friday, I'm never guilty that that's what I'm doing. You touched on technology before, and usually I take my laptop with me, because sitting on a plane can really, finding out ways to maximize your time, because if I'm going down interstate for a game or whatever, there's going to be a fair chunk of time which I'm not going to be able to catch up on work or anything like that. So that guilt does eventually go away, but I think that communication part at the start does remove that, because once you've got that established rapport with your manager, and you work on that arrangement together, at least you're partnering with someone, as opposed to it's all on you. So that'd probably be another tip, is around once you've got that established arrangement with your manager, be fluid. That could change as well depending on different needs and whatever. But that communication is that building block from it as well.
Yeah, I love it. And it goes, I always think about guilt as a moral compass almost. And so it's telling us, are we doing something wrong that we shouldn't be doing? And if you're feeling guilty as a result of that, then stop doing it, basically. Or are we feeling guilty for something that is actually because it, potentially is challenging our values? So I hear, a lot, as an example from this morning, only because it's first in my head, was a lady at daycare saying, I feel so guilty every day I drop my child off. Is she doing something wrong? Or is it because potentially it's something deep in her value set around the action? And it's definitely the second. But you get to that point, don't you, where you go, okay, well, my values are, and you get really firm on what they are. And I think that's how come just listening to your story and your narrative, it's gone, because you've overcome it, because you really do value what you value. Like we were talking before.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, as I've reflected, if we go to the next slide, when I've been able to reflect on this in the last sort of 12 months, when we really started pushing this a lot internally at Mercer around the promotion of flexible working, I think what, some of the key skills that you take out of managing this kind of flexible working arrangement, that's what you start to, I really learned that I valued the skills that I've developed over the years from managing this work arrangement. I touched on communication before and time management, but that methodical approach to things, it's part of the course now, but I still remember before I made the AFL, I would never have been in the office before 8:30 a.m. on any day. And now, because I need to fit things in, and that integration means that I'm sometimes at work at 7 a.m. or 7:30 to try and slot things in where I may not have had to start doing that in the past. And I'm quite grateful that is a skill that I've been able to develop over the years. And I think a real bonus for me in terms of umpiring at AFL level is that you learn some confidence. You can back yourself in the decisions that you're making to other key stakeholders, particularly players and fans and coaches and whatever. Performing under pressure. AFL is a highly televised game with 26 plus cameras and 50 odd thousand people at most games. You really learn to perform your skill set under pressure. So reverting back to my business partner role, working under time pressures or just pressures, stakeholder engagement. I've sort of taken the skill set, those transferable skills from what I've done in AFL umpiring and put it into my work here at Mercer. And I probably hadn't really fully appreciated that until I took the time to actually reflect and talk about it. And that I've spoken about dependable, assertiveness and resilience. A joke I always make to people here at Mercer is, when you leave the office at the end of the day, you don't have 40,000 people booing you as you walk away to the office.
That's true.
I think all officials, in all sports, if you've been booed and coming off, it's not a great feeling. But again, over years of resilience, you sort of just let that happen. But I always think it'd be quite funny if someone was leaving the office here and we all started booing and shouting at them as they were leaving. So you definitely build resilience and perseverance through that. So again, more transferable skills. And ultimately,
listening to an amazing TED talk the other week about emotional intelligence, basically, is what it was about. And they were talking about emotional Teflon and how sometimes we all need to have a bit of emotional Teflon where, comments like the 40,000 people booing can just slip off and slide off rather than being sticky and having it attached. Has it evolved? Because that's a huge part of your emotional intelligence, being able to park it basically and put it over there and say, okay, they're booing for a certain reason, but it's not personal against me and my self-esteem.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think it comes from a lived-in experience. I think if you plucked anyone out of the street and had 40,000 people booing at them, I think the natural reaction would be to maybe take it personally. Yeah. But I think sporting officials all over the world, no matter if you're umpiring or a community sport at level or at AFL level, you're always going to have people who are going to disagree with you. And I think that's just a matter of sport that you take on. And it's those around you and that team mentality that helps support and creates that feeling of it's not personal. You've gone out there and if you're confident in the decision-making you've been making, you should take that confidence in everything else that you do, because no matter how many people are booing at you from there. Yeah. So I think that emotional intelligence might be touched on is that I would think a team mentality that's definitely helped me out. If I can see how others are reacting to that kind of environment, then then I think that's okay. You don't have to take it personally. They're not really talking about you. They're just, most of the time it's just venting anyway. That's sport. So and I think that's another key skill that you take particularly into the HR world, is you do need to have that level of consistency when you're dealing with maybe difficult matters and difficult situations, that HR plays that role of consistency from there. And another great comment that people always give me here at Mercer is, well, you're an umpire and you're working HR, man, you really must not want any friends in life. So if that's any way of how to try and be consistent, if you're consistently consistent, then you've done your job.
Then you're doing it. So
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about the trust and trustworthiness, because that comes up all the time when we hear people saying, oh, I don't feel like my manager trusts me, or managers saying, look, I'd love to go down this path, but I'm just not sure about that accountability and trusting people. What's been your experience in both, I suppose, as an employee and as a manager?
I think definitely as an employee, you question. I think if you've got a good communication dialogue open, you can question each other on those elements of trust. So if a manager would come to me and says, I don't trust you if you're saying you're doing X, Y, Z, it would be, my incumbent with me would be to say, well, why don't you trust me? And how can I remove that trust? How can I build that trust, not remove it, or just remove that fear of the no trust? And like I touched on before is, I wanted to make sure that we never got to that point. So that's why I was trying to make sure I was very dependable. I was very consistent. I was doing what my job required of me from there. So I sort of jumped the gun a little bit to make sure they never had a mistrust. So my work would speak for itself. And knowing that I did talk about that at the interview stages, I made sure I go, well, from the day dot, this is how I'm going to have to maintain that relationship through there. And through that communication, I would always throw back to my manager is, how do you feel things are going at the moment? Do you have any concerns? Do you have any, is there anything else you want me to communicate more to you? Being as a younger male than as I was then, I think probably learned that communication wasn't my strong suit. I just maybe assumed that they were comfortable with things and whatever. So I had to get out of my comfort zone and talk about things to them and try and draw answers out of them through there. So from a HR point of view, I think I try and go with that same mentality as why can't it happen? Why couldn't we try something? With technology nowadays, I think it's almost a moot point about if you don't trust someone. It's like, well, offer them trust to start off with, and if they don't perform well, then that's on them to build it back up. I think managers, if they start from a point of yes for colleagues who come to them with a flexible work arrangement, and obviously communication is vital again for that as well. I know I implore most of our managers here is to try it out, because I mean at the end of the day we all have lives outside of work. So if it means we might be able to get an increase in employee effectiveness, or they're much happier and more motivated at work, then that's a bonus for us. And if all we've had to do is allow them to either work from home or change their working hours or go part-time, whatever that's a return on investment for us.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And look, the thing is that I often reflect on is with people when they say to me, look, I just don't trust my teams, or whatever they say, is, what role are they in? And often they're in roles which they're dealing with highly sensitive information, or their role is to sell X amount of business. And so when you start to unravel that and have a discussion about, will you trust them? You trust them with your profits to be able to go out and sell X amount of revenue or whatever, but you can't trust them to work in a way that's going to optimize their life. It's almost like you see the penny drop, and there is actually an intrinsic link between trust and bias. And so it's about, I suppose, through me and my advocacy around trying to get people to support flexible working, it's about taking it to that next level, to say exactly what you said around give it a go. Start from a standpoint of yes.
Yeah.
Not every type of flexibility works for everyone or every role. Not everyone's going to want to do what you do or what I do. But, give it a crack. And if you're feeling like some of those emotions are bubbling up around that fear and not trusting people, it's time to go a bit deeper about what that really means.
Yep.
Tim,
I agree with you more.
I love your work. So you run 21 kilometres sometimes, up to 21 kilometres or more than 20 backwards.
Not always backwards.
I remember
No.
you told me that. I'm just
There is a
looking
lot
at
of
the picture, imagining everyone running around backwards fast.
no. There is. I would say there's a high portion of backwards running. So boundary umpiring, you've got to keep your eye on the plate at all times, and it's a unique skill, I think, to be able to run backwards at speed, which has taken me nearly 18 years to perfect it. But no, but 21 kilometres is normally the average we'll cover on a normal game day. That includes warming up, doing the game itself, and then cooling down afterwards as well. Back when I was younger, it would be you rock up, you start doing the game, you finish up, and head off home straight away. So it's certainly, when you get to a professional environment, it certainly changes a lot more in terms of the requirements on you. But you have to do it if you want to be able to perform week in, week out.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing all of your insights today. It's been absolutely amazing.
No worries. It's been good to talk about it. Hopefully, if there's any listeners who watch AFL football, if you have a look at what the boundary umpires are doing, or any of the umpires in general, and hopefully maybe you learned something today of the kind of stuff that we have to do. Yeah. And we are human.
Go to a game and don't boo.
Yes, don't boo.
Here, even if you don't agree with them, maybe.
Yeah, just say good job. It'd be good. 39,999 people against one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tim, so much for sharing your insights. Tim is on social media. He does publish some amazing articles. So if you are interested, you could follow him on LinkedIn. And thank you once again. Appreciate all of your and support behind Flexible Working Day.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you.